children, people of all kinds, whoever you are, everyone's welcomed in this domain. It's your boy Peter here, aka Peter Freakout 10, baby, bringing you guys an episode of the Movie Review Show, where the good movies are always reviewed. Okay, back again to our movie review. Now, today, I'll be honest, this is one of the last films that I ever thought I would ever see myself reviewing. Because I never thought that this was going to be the type of series that I would ever find myself getting into. I know it's a huge craze, and I have a friend of mine that is really into this series more than I was. In fact, he's even reviewed this film. That wasn't until recently, the start of this year, when another couple friends actually sat me down and showed me the show. And watching it with them, I get the craze. I get why it's become such a beloved property in the eyes of not just kids, but also teens and adults. Thus why I was really excited to check out this film. And I also decided to review it in prep because this summer I actually planned to check out the sequel to this. And this is just a franchise and a property that's become a sight that you cannot avoid no matter how hard you try or where you go. In fact, this started a bunch of trading cards that have led to fistfights on the playground. And as news reports would put it, turning the playground into a black market. So naturally it meant that Hollywood was going to bring this series to the big screen. And what film is that, you may be asking? What is the next property to get the Hollywood adaptation? That film is none other than Pokémon, the first movie. But just because Pokémon has this big craze, does that mean this property was worthy to bring it to the big screen? Well, grab your Pokeballs, your Ash Ketchum uniform, make sure you have studied Jesse, James, and Meowth's cult-like seance entrance sayings as we discuss Pokémon the first movie. Now, Pokémon the First Movie, or Pokémon the First Movie Mewtwo Strikes Back, actually has two release dates. The first one, if you look online, it says the film came out in the year 1998. That's because the 1998 release was actually the Japan release. Now, for the States, it actually came out in 1999. And it's directed by a guy named Kunihiko Yuyama. I hope I'm saying his last name right, or his name right. This is a guy who's worked mostly in anime before this film, but where he really got it big was his work on the Pokemon anime, thus why he was brought on to direct this film. And he would actually return to direct the sequel to this movie, Pokemon 2000 the movie, which is why I'm making my way through the episodes before that movie, as we are close to the Orange Island episodes, and I want to watch those to catch up before the movie, and I'll get deeper into why later, because it does tie into this movie. But this is, of course, based on the beloved Pokemon anime that actually started in Japan in 1997. Then it was brought over into the States, where it aired on Kids WB in 1998 for an American audience. And the show itself actually started from a video game series from Nintendo, which started in 1996 in Japan with Pokemon Red and Green, which the first one in the States would be Pokemon Red and Blue. I know once the show came out, Pokemon Yellow started drawing influence from the show, including when Brock was introduced. They made him look more like the Brock in the show than in his original design. But I'll be honest with you, looking at the history of Pokemon, I could be wrong about this. Again, I'm new to Pokemon, but I really think the anime is what helped it blow up. I could be wrong, because it seemed like once kids saw the anime and what it was, I think that's really where the show really helped get the name into the spotlight, and a lot of people started to play the games, and that's really where the sales blew up. Because that show has become the most popular series on Kids WB. And it's funny too, because originally, from what I hear, Nintendo was actually hesitant on making a Pokemon series a reality. And then when it became big, that's what pushed them to get the movie going in Japan. They saw this as the next logical step, looking to go above and beyond what was established in the anime while the TV show was on a brief hiatus, bringing in the writer Takashi Shudo, who has actually written for the show and has written for the next movie, Pokemon 2000 the movie. He wanted to create a story that was not only compelling for kids, but also the adult audience, as well as the adult fans, and touched upon themes of existentialism, something he felt the adult audience watching would get behind. Thus why he created the character of Mewtwo, drawing influence from the titular character in Phantom of the Opera. With the big build-up to the movie, the team also used the show to build up plot points that would be explored in this movie. That would later be revealed as, because Pokemon was on hiatus, they actually had those episodes released after the movie. But I think it became easier for the States because practically every day on Kids WB they were airing new episodes. But in Japan around the time, OLM Inc., the company in Japan for its original release, approved of the script and gave the film a budget of $5 million. It's unknown how production went, but they made it in the way they did the cartoon, only on a bigger scale with more money attached. The film was unleashed in Japan with a positive reception, with praise directed towards the exploration of ethical topics such as cloning, genetic modification, and existentialism. Then, of course, Pokemon comes to the States. 4Kids picks it up and makes it an even bigger hit. And it's decided that the movie should come here. And because Kids WB already had their hand in the show, it was decided that Warner Brothers was going to distribute it. And like any anime property, they had to rework it into a release for the American audience. This kind of started off rough. Warner Brothers objected to the original Japanese version, feeling that it strayed too far from a vision that they wanted, feeling that the movie was lacking a good against evil scenario, and had the film rewritten to emphasize Mewtwo more as a villain. They also objected to a lot of the darker elements and had them removed, especially there was like a few minutes of Mewtwo's origin that they had removed, and apparently this VHS has elements of that prologue that was removed, the story of Mewtwo's origin, which takes place before the feature. And they also insisted on voiceover be added to spell out for the adult audience who knew nothing about Pokemon what was going on. And it just seems like Warner Brothers kept insisting that the film be more mainstream and wanted some stuff done for marketing purposes, like having the music be replaced. And they even tried to get celebrity voices to dub over characters' lines. Originally, Johnny Depp was going to be Mewtwo, and they were almost going to have Leonardo DiCaprio dub over Veronica Taylor's voice. Cher at one point was even going to be in it. And these changes pissed off the original Japanese crew. I know there was also some strain on Michael Hagney, who contributing to directing aspects of this version, who the reason being was because he had a hard time matching the new dialogue with the original lip syncing. And like all stuff that would play in the States after being transferred to America, they had to change particular aspects to fit the American audience, such as the signs, the food in the movie. There's the fact that in an episode they're eating donuts when actually it's like rice balls that they ate, even though later on they're eating rice balls. Stuff like that was changed to suit the American audience so they could connect with them more. They did allow the short here, Pikachu's Vacation, which pretty much also played in the theaters. Eventually, though, the film wrapped up production. And when those people saw the first trailer during the showing of The Iron Giant or Mystery Men, the hype was kicked into high gear. You couldn't go through a channel with a TV show without an ad for Pokemon the first movie playing. Posters were placed on subways and buses and on billboards. Burger King got involved with marketing the film, making toys, which they ended up recalling because they would come with these Pokeballs that accidentally killed a kid. For the soundtrack, they got a lot of artists involved, like NSYNC, Christina Aguilera, and of course the famous M2M song, Don't Say You Love Me, which they did a music video for, which aired on the WB block after the new episode premiere of Seventh Heaven. At the theaters, they also gave out Pokemon cards exclusive to the movie. But it really goes to show how much of an event this movie was and how much Pokemon had its hand on the world. And I think my friend Kyle can speak for that too, because he got to see this in the theater with his brother. I know kids were pulling a Phantom Menace and faking sick or skipping school to see it. Thus why they dubbed the day Pokeflu. And it's easy to see from box office because when it opened, it knocked the Bone Collector off the top spot in its second week, and it grossed over $50 million at the box office in its opening weekend. It became the highest opening for a Warner Brothers animated feature, and it became the highest opening for an animated feature and for a non-Disney animated feature, and in the month of November, a record previously held by Rugrats movie the previous year. And it finished its run with over $172 million, and it became the highest grossing video game based movie. Videotape sales may have helped with that too as well. It was also a big seller on video, which I think made Warner Brothers excited to get the sequel into the States. Despite the cash rolling in for the United States version, the American version was received not as well as the Japanese version. On Rotten Tomatoes, it carries a 17% with praise going to the film for its animation. I know Roger Ebert's guest reviewer gave the film a positive review for what they were going for with its message. However, critics ripped the film apart for feeling like a video game commercial rather than an actual movie. I know Roger Ebert did not like the film, awarding it only 2 stars as he criticized the film for its story. And I'll be honest, his review just came across like an out-of-touch grandfather who couldn't understand why Pokemon was so appealing to the young viewers. I didn't get his review. I was listening to it before this video. I'm like, what? As he also described it as eye candy for young viewers. I know fans of the original version also criticized the film for its changes to the Japanese version, which wasn't the fault of them, as Warner Brothers was kind of hesitant on those changes. That being said, I do think they're in the minority because on the audience side it is a 78%, on IMDb it is a 6.3 out of 10, so I think the audiences like the film more than they do. I know at the end of the year on Roger Ebert in the Movies, when he did his segment on the worst stuff, Joel Siegel listed this as the worst movie of the year, which hearing that, I'm like, you serious, man? Some of the films on the segment I agree with, like Baby Geniuses, Wild Wild West, okay, but films like this, Inspector Gadget, and Lake Placid, I'm like, you serious, man? I really don't get you. And I know the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards took their shots at it, where it won Worst Achievement for Animation and was nominated for Biggest Disappointment, the same category that they also had the Blair Witch Project under, which, kiss my ass, Stinkers. I know it's their opinion, but a couple years before this, they had Old Dogs Go to Heaven 2 on there, and the same people on that thing were also putting the Blair Witch Project on there. I don't take that shit seriously. And considering the fact that even the year before this, they also tried to give a stinker award to Prince of Egypt for When You Believe, which I can't believe anything now when I hear that, because they're in the minority on that, because a lot of people seem to enjoy that song. And watching this, I just rather go in with my own opinion on a movie. And before I get deeper into the film, I gotta say this is a review of the American version, as it's the version I watch, it's the version I have, as you guys can see, and it was the version that I was able to get a hold of. And I'm aware of the differences between both versions, but this isn't going to be a compare and contrast video. This is going to be my thoughts on what I saw on the screen with this version, and it's based on what I have. So if you're coming for that, this is a review of what this version is and what I thought. So if that's not your thing, you can leave. With that said, when I first heard about this movie before getting into Pokemon, like I said, it didn't look like my thing. I wasn't interested. I was honestly surprised, too, that it was going to theaters so early. I mean, like, yeah, Rugrats, the movie, did that. But that took some time before it got into theaters. It was only when Pokemon was in the States that this got a theatrical release, and I was surprised about that. I was like, really? As I thought it was direct-to-video, especially with how early this was in the Pokemon craze, and you'd think something like this would be an hour-long TV special, but I think the craze was helping it get this film in the theaters. But around the time that this came to video, I started gaining interest in Pokemon, and I learned that the film tied into the show, and as someone who had started gaining interest, I was excited to see what the movie would do. I was excited to see what they could bring, especially with after the fact that this came out, that it was announced that a sequel was coming. And so when it came out on video, I bought the tape and worked through the episodes leading up to the show, because I've been watching the show with friends, and we're close to the Orange Island season, so that'll be very cool to see. I know the next one's going to tie into after that. And watching this film, I gotta say, this is a solid movie. I think it's definitely one that I can understand the high audience rating for. I will say this, while the creators intended for the film to be bigger than the show, you could definitely tell it's a film that, while it definitely is big, you can definitely tell that the studio and the people making it did not want to go out, but rather start with a small dip in the pond. As while it has the plot of a feature-length film, it does hold itself back to make it a medium-sized scope film, which normally I would be harsher on, but I can kind of see why they did it, because it kind of is for the team showing what they can do with a Pokemon movie, and as well as showing what they're able to do with Warner Brothers at the helm before going bigger, which from what I've seen of Pokemon 2000 in the trailer seems to be the case. And for what that is, it's still a fun movie that I think has some guts in, especially for Pokemon. And I think the people that this film was made for are the fans of Pokemon, because those who didn't like it really were a lot harsher on it than the actual fans. I mean, that's not going to justify the cons that I talk about in this video. But getting into the cast, in this film, you got Veronica Taylor reprising her role from the show as Ash. She was also the voice of Sailor Pluto on Sailor Moon. Aikio Otani as Pikachu, which she reprises her role from the show. Rachel Lillis reprising her role as Misty and Jessie. Eric Stewart reprising his role as both Brock and James from the show. Jay Good, who is a Broadway actor. And the other actors and actresses aren't really anybody you recognize. They're just Japanese actors or other actors who have been in anime properties that I've never seen. But getting into this film, the plot is basically, for those unfamiliar with the Pokemon show, basically the show follows these kids. You have Ash, played by Veronica Taylor, Misty, played by Rachel Lillis, and Brock, played by Eric Stewart, who are basically on this journey to help Ash become a Pokemon master, all the while being chased by Team Rocket under the command of Giovanni, played by Ted Lewis. Well, we learned that long ago Giovanni sent a research expedition into the woods where they came across a rare Pokemon known as Mew. They got its DNA and began to perform tests, including genetic modification and cloning. Basically, this Pokemon grows into Mewtwo, and upon discovering that Giovanni plans to use him as a weapon, as that's all he views him as rather than a living animal, he manages to escape, destroys the lab, and now he basically wants to destroy humanity and all other Pokemon. And so he uses his psychic ability to mind control this woman, one of the 10,000 Nurse Joys. If you guys have seen the show, you guys know what I'm talking about. To basically trick other Pokemon trainers, Ash, Misty, and Brock especially, into coming to this island so he can try and capture their Pokemon and perform genetic modification on them to build his clone army. So now Ash, Misty, and Brock need to fight back against Mewtwo. All the while, Team Rocket ends up being drawn into this as they discover what's going on and have to also go against Giovanni's original plan and stop Mewtwo. Will the group be able to stop Mewtwo from building his army, or will they be the first moose heads that Mewtwo has on his wall after building his army? I feel like Pokemon the first movie succeeds because while some people may look at the setup and describe it as an extended episode of the show. I feel like the movie does a great job giving it a slightly larger scale than what was on the show. Again, I say slightly larger because it's not a huge scale, especially when you compare it to the year before this with Rugrats movie, or even the same year you had South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, which I do put above this. I still feel the film does a great job keeping it to that medium-sized scope that they were going for. But in a weird way, I feel like they still managed to come out with what still feels like a big movie. And I think that has a lot to do with the storytelling and the themes at play here. Because while you had the show touch upon dark themes, this one really pushes that to the next level as it touches upon themes that include cloning, genetic modification, and the movie dares to touch those areas in a way that is adult, in a way that a kid can understand it, but also touches it in a way that an adult who went to see this film also gets across what they're going with. And I appreciate that it doesn't pull back or lose its nerve. And those are the moments where the film really shines with its tone and creates some scenes that I'm actually surprised they managed to get away with. Like the opening with Mewtwo and how he breaks out of the lab. Or later on when Team Rocket breaks into the facility and sees the scientists at work with Pokémon. They call it a Poke Frankenstein. And just how they're at work on them. That's the stuff stray out of Nightmares that I'm actually surprised that they still kept in this version. Like I said earlier, the Japanese cut has a bit more story elements that push the film into an even darker area, especially with Mewtwo as a character. I think that's why many people consider that version the definitive version. But I'm gonna be honest here, I don't mind that. I know that's controversial, but let me explain. Because the film not only is as dark enough as it is, but I also think it paces the film a bit better as the film moves at a fast pace. And I think if they kept those elements in this cut, it would have slowed the film down. Because let's face it, the Japanese audience do have a much... what's the word? The Japanese audience have a bit more patience when it comes to story elements than an American audience does. Let's be honest here. And I like how the story draws Misty, Brock, and Ash into this as they're tricked into believing they're going to be a part of some big tournament. And they begin to realize that this was all a ploy set up by Mewtwo to capture the Pokemon. And I like it for that because not only are they at the forefront, but the Pokemons as a character, and they're not sidekicks in their own film. It's not like someone else is stealing the flame from them and taking it. They're legitimately involved in trying to stop Mewtwo. And while the story doesn't go beyond the arc that was already established in the show with the characters, I do feel like because we already know them from the show, you still have this emotional attachment to them. And while they're at the forefront, they're really used as plot devices to really push the story forward as opposed to the story being centered around them while they're the main characters. It's also about the other Pokemons too, and Mewtwo. So while they're the stars, the story's not centered on them being built up as characters beyond what they already are. Despite this, you still have the emotional attachment to them, which is especially true later on when, spoiler, Ash gets turned to stone. And you have that great scene when you see Pikachu trying to wake him up and he's shocking him when he realizes it's not working. You have that scene where everyone's sad. That is an emotional scene. I remember when I watched this with a friend of mine, that person was like, oh my god. And it works because of how long you followed these characters for and how that carries into the film. And once even Mewtwo is revealed, I like the idea behind him as a villain. I appreciate that they didn't go the easy route and make Team Rocket the villains or even Giovanni, but rather created a new villain who is a Frankenstein of Giovanni. I like the Phantom of the Opera inspiration to him and how you see him as a stranger in a strange world, a bit of a personality with a bit of anger of how he views the person who found him. as just a failed experiment and not as a pet to him. And he thinks all humanity is like this, and he's trying to use this as an opportunity to turn the Pokemon against each other and create his own army so he can go out into the world and destroy everything. And that brings up another problem that I hear people have with this film. It's the fact that they put the message in this version, because this is not in the Japanese version, but it's the message that fighting is wrong, and some people feel it's forced in this movie. And I'll be honest, I never had a problem with it, or I didn't have a problem with it because this is my first time watching it, because I think a lot of people look at it like it defines the movie, but that is not true, because when you look at it on a surface level and in the context of which the scene takes place when they bring that up, it really applies more so to the situation that they are currently in that moment, as opposed to the whole film. And more so meaning, in a way, they are not meant to turn on each other and fight the way they are in this movie. And I like that because it feels like it gives the movie a sense of heart to it, and it does make you feel for the Pokemon in this situation they're in. And I like the fact that the movie uses it as a tipping point to get the resolution going. With that said, you're going to have the emotional moments if you watch this film, but the film's humor is still there. There's still some really funny dialogue in there. The moments with Team Rocket still get a laugh out of me. I do think they're a lot less annoying here than they are in some of the later episodes. If you think you're not going to get a good laugh out of this film, you'd be wrong. But yeah, I think the story, for what was cut from the Japanese release, I still think it's a solid story that I still think honors the original version. Now, on a technical side, I will say this. I think this is a really well-directed film, regardless of what version you look at, whether it be this version or the Japanese version, because they both have the same animation style with some minor tweaks that this version has. But they're really little ones that you really have to observe, as they're mostly on the signs and how they were translated to English, and some added stuff like the cartoon. So they're really minor differences, as most of the changes, like the big changes, are for the story department that I mentioned earlier. That being said, it doesn't matter because the direction on both sides is solid. For the Japanese side who animated the film, visually you can tell the directors and animators had more to work with here in terms of a budget than on the show. Not to say the show wasn't good looking, it's just this has more here than what's on the show, which I appreciate despite having that medium-sized budget. I think this is where you really start to see the film kind of have a little bit more of the sight of a bigger scope than the medium-sized scope that it really has on its plate. Because it has a great visual style that gives it its own feel from the show. The color palette looks great, like the opening in the jungle or the castle where Mewtwo is hiding. It's got a great blend of CGI and hand-drawn animation. I appreciate that the CGI is used sparingly and used only in particular moments like the door opening. That I really do like. And when it comes to the translating, I think translating this film into English, I think Michael Hagee does a great job there. Or Hagee, or however you want to say his name. I don't really get it. But that aside, I think also with the more comedic moments on both sides, Japanese and Americans, I think they do great there, getting some great comedic timing out of the animation and the cast members. The designs of the Pokemon look great. They're still very creative and very plentiful in how many they are and how they look. And the more action-centered moments are great. They're animated with a lot of pizzazz and energy. The fight scenes with the Pokemon, I think the animators do a great job once again showcasing the speed and the abilities of the Pokemon in this movie, and how those scenes were edited with a lot of quick cuts and close-ups of the Pokemon, sometimes getting their fists into each other's face. It really makes those moments a sight to behold and really awesome to watch. And this movie's G. It's insane that this film got away with a G rating. It could be because they had to toe up stuff from the Japanese version. Still, there's some dark elements, especially not just in the story department, but also in the action department. But it looks really good, and I'm not complaining complaining about it being violent because it's a sight to behold and it's done really well. You can definitely see the animators' ambition in these moments and wanting to go above and beyond what they accomplished in the show, and I think they accomplished that. I know they changed the music in this version too, especially in the final fight, whereas in the Japanese version has that sort of rock score to it. But I didn't mind the music they picked here because I thought it went well with the film's message. I like the Blessed Union of the Souls song. My brother, tell me, what are we fighting for? We've got to end this war. We faced each other from different times. The anger burns from different paths. I like that song. I like the M2M song at the credits, Don't Say You Love Me, which I don't know how that plays into the film because it's a romantic song and there's not as much romance in this film. But it's a nice song. I like those two. I like the bubblegum pop song there. There's also some other good songs on the soundtrack from people like Britney Spears, Vitamin C, Aaron Carter, Christina Aguilera, NSYNC. I do especially like the Vitamin C song and the short in the opening, and they're just fun to listen to. So definitely some catchy songs. But despite the changes made with this version, especially compared to the Japanese version, and the changes Warner Brothers had done to the film, I think they did a fairly solid job with this movie. Regardless of what version you watch, it's still a greatly made film. On top of that, I'll say, the voice acting is solid, with Veronica Taylor, who I think does a great job as Ash. I do think that she does a bit better here as opposed to the show, being that she does have a little bit more on her plate to work with, those being the emotional moments, as they required her to get a bit more dramatic with the character of Ash. Not to say there wasn't any dramatic stuff on the show, but it wasn't to the extent of this movie. And I think she does well in that area. I think while that's going on, I still think she maintains the playful, cocky side Ash has from the show, while also kind of contributes to the character's evolution as a character, having taken on those moments. And Veronica just nailed it. I thought she did well for what she had to do. Rachel Lillis is both Misty and Jessie, which, when I first watched the show, I was actually surprised that she did both, being that she knows how to distinguish the voice from the other, so give it to her for that. Surprised me when I found out she did both. And on both sides she does well, with Misty playing this good-hearted but bullheaded friend that while she wants the best for Ash and her friend, she has no issue getting hostile when they deserve it. And on Jessie's side, she plays a good stuck-up princess who her sidekick James, they both let their cockiness get the better of them, along with their cat Meowth. I think she does well there, too. Some really funny dialogue between her and James. Speaking of James, Eric Stewart, who does the voice of both Brock and James. With Brock, he does great playing this woman-obsessed trainer who one day may get in trouble with the law, considering how close he gets with women. Surprised no one has called the cops on him. But he has fun with the role, and just like Veronica does get a chance to stretch his emotional wings a bit. And as James, he does well too. Like I said, him and Rachel play great off each other. They have some really great back and forth moments. I die at the scene when they dress up as Vikings and they make the Minnesota joke at them. That got a good laugh out of me. Maddie Blaustein does well for Meow. The character, it's a she playing a he. He's basically the comedic sidekick of Team Rocket. And he works there for what he's given. Then got some good laughs out of me. Jay Good as Mewtwo. I thought he was great. I gotta give him this. I thought he gave Mewtwo this cold, resentful side with a hint of sarcasm that I felt really brought him to life. And definitely easy to see that he was a Broadway actor, because his character does come across with that Phantom of the Opera approach. So, yeah, Jay Good, I thought did great. Other actors, you got Aikio Altani as the voice of Pikachu. Good for what she has to do. It's Pikachu, just doing the Pika Pika voice, so not really much asked of her, but for what she had to do, she did well. Ed Paul as the voice of Giovanni. Not really much to say. Does well for the couple seconds that he has. I do think he's better on the show because he's a bit more threatening on the show. Koichi Yamadera as Mew. I thought he did well for that role. He doesn't have that much to say other than that one emotional moment with Mewtwo. I do think he does well there. I know Megan Hollinshed reprises her role as Nurse Joy. It's Nurse Joy. What do you expect? She does well for what she's given. But the other cast members, there isn't really much to say besides they all do fine for what they're given. Some of them are voiced by the same person. And they definitely know how to distinguish themselves. Nothing noteworthy, but still alright. Other than that, the acting is really good. Even with the few that don't have a lot to do, it's not necessarily that their performance are bad. They just don't have much to work with as opposed to the main cast. But yeah, for a first Pokemon movie, I think the team did a solid job. I mean, it does have its flaws. It's not perfect. And I have two cons to give. The first one is the movie's runtime. It is a bit too short, clocking in at 93 minutes, which did surprise me. I thought the film was going to be a bit longer, but yeah, could have went on for a bit longer despite moving at a fast pace. But at the same time, as I said, there is enough story packed in, and also, I don't like the fact that the movie loses its nerve and then suddenly decides to make Mewtwo a sympathetic figure. Even though that's the point of him throughout the whole movie. But the movie really shows that he's lost in, he's not listening to anyone. And then it's suddenly like, okay, let's make him suddenly be like, okay, what I did was wrong. It really kind of took away the villainous arc that they were going for. Granted, I don't want him to go out to the world and destroy the world with what they had, but I think it would have worked better if Mew and him had a fight to reinforce the whole thing that they were going for with the whole violence is wrong angle, like having them fight, and before he basically almost kills him, he realizes, oh my god, this is my brother I'm gonna kill. Therefore, you can have a bit more of the violence is wrong message in there. It's just here, it feels so like out of nowhere for him to realize, oh my god, what I'm doing is wrong. I think that could have been a bit better in the final. But those are really my only two problems with the film. Because bottom line, Pokemon the first movie is a real pleasure to anyone who's a fan of the show. Regardless of what version you watch, this is a ride that will please kids or adults who are fans of Pokemon. It's also a great crash course for the crew to show what they can bring to the screen with this brand. So, if you like the show, I highly recommend you watch Pokemon the first movie. It's one of the better adaptations of a cartoon, and it really makes me excited to see where they go with Pokemon 2000. So, when it comes down to it, I give Pokemon the first movie a 9.2 out of 10. And it deserves it. Therefore gets the Alexander seal of approval. Definitely one to check out if you like the Pokemon show. And definitely a great continuation of the show. So, yeah, that is my review for Pokemon the first movie. I am working on a few other reviews. I got the Turok 2 review. I also have my Scream 3 review, which is almost done, so be on the lookout for that. I also have a review of American Psycho and Shanghai Noon, so be on the lookout for those. I'm also going to be working on my review of Mission Impossible. Been wanting to review this for a while, especially with number 2 I plan to watch for Memorial Day. May watch it this weekend, so I can start writing it up and get like a few other reviews going. Yeah, I'm going to finish those up, so be on the lookout for that. But with that said, I will see you guys later. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of Pokemon the first movie. Do you guys enjoy it? Which dub do you enjoy more? This version or the Japanese version? I'd love to know you guys' thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.